So, Michael, thank you for the background there. You were mentioning about the lagging indicators versus leading indicators, and the AppFire leadership team, as you were mentioning, was focused more on the revenue side, customer churns, but not so much on what's happening, at the beginning of the journey. Could you maybe share a little bit of maybe anecdotal experience of when you found out about something like this is happening? How did you start moving the team towards starting to think about the leading indicators rather than only focusing on after the fact?
Yeah, well, it came from a shift in focus to growth, quite frankly. AppFire got its first big round of investment in the beginning of 2020. And investors immediately, of course, are about revenue growth, and Appfire started its acquisition spree as well. So focus became on growth, and so a growth team was being built out in the product org to address that. And um, it was already obvious, what was happening historically and how our conversion rate was working, but no one had any idea why. So if the growth team had a mandate to increase revenue, that means they had to improve trial conversions and in the long run improve retention, right? But improve trial conversions was the first order of business. Well, we knew because we adopted the Reforge framework for our growth strategy that we had to understand what was behind the conversion rates we were seeing, which weren't spectacular. So it was obvious we had to understand the activation journey. We actually had to define the activation journey for our trial users so we could then instrument it, so then we could then understand why certain customers weren't converting and address that friction in the activation funnel first in order to drive increased conversions, because that was the first order of business to start making a meaningful contribution to ARR for the organization.
So you're saying that even the focus on activation came into place because the conversion rates were starting to take was it taking longer, or is that was that the reason, or it was more saying that, hey, this is what's our current state now, if you want to grow much faster we need to improve all parts of the equation rather than not just the latter part of it?
Well, it was your second option. It was, hey, we're seeing this conversion rate. We need to improve it. We need to grow our customer base. We need to grow our revenue, and again, understanding at first theoretically the connection between activation and trial conversion, and then in the long run, we built a model that proved it. We could demonstrate what impact we could have on conversion rates as we improved activation. Um, so it wasn't a matter of there was a particular trend with them at that time. It was more, hey, we need to do more than just marketing tactics to drive revenue growth. And so a growth team was built, essentially, that I was a part of, a founding member of, to address that need.
And Michael, at that time, if you could maybe, enlighten our audience a little bit. When you say the growth team, I'm guessing the focus was to first find out where are the bottlenecks across the entire journey, and then let's go figure out how do we go optimize it, or or the other way around. For example, we had podcast with Amplitude, some time back, almost 6 7 months back, and they started optimizing various parts of the equation much earlier before they understood where the bottlenecks were. We had another SaaS company, we did a podcast with them, and they also started off saying, hey, we want to go focus on our self-serve journey, and then we focus on this portion of the journey first, and then later they came to realize that no, that's a bad practice. We want to go look at the entire spectrum. So in your case, how was it? You started looking at, you know, the visibility portions of it, or you started acting right away?
Well, first we had to solve for visibility. We knew what our first questions were, which is what is impeding our trial customers from successfully realizing the value proposition of our products and wanting to incorporate that into their daily work life, converting, right? We just did not know, besides the occasional anecdotal, evidence, the occasional conversation, we did not know when it did not scale. So we first had to, and keep in mind, by the way, AppFire was constantly acquiring new apps. At the peak, there were about 150 apps in the portfolio. So, and we were going to concentrate on 40 plus apps in the end, focus on those, highest revenue potential apps. So we had to have a scalable, repeatable methodology for answering that question. Where was the difficulty our users were having seeing the value prop? So the first order of business was, okay, how do we do that? Well, we're gonna settle on an activation journey map framework. And then we are going to, in a standard way, for every app that we focus our growth strategy on, we're going to develop that activation journey map. That's going to inform our instrumentation of the product. And every product was instrumented the same way. They all had a sign-up moment instrumented, a setup moment, an aha moment, a habit moment, very consistently, so that we could take this playbook, this growth playbook, we were developing it, and apply it to each app as we focused on them. And I say it wasn't necessarily sequential because we had, in the end, we had 10 growth PMs that we were working with. I think it was 10. Sounds right. We had a lot of growth PMs, so we were, in parallel working on a lot of apps. But that meant we had to have a playbook, we had to have a process that was standardized the way we could attack it. So yeah, the first order of business was what is going on, what is the impediment, and the it became really clear, really quick, where it was, and I can go into that more detail if you like. But it was really having a very disciplined, structured way to understand the activation journey and to instrument it so that we could diagnose the problems and then devise growth experiments to address them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's very rare. It's very contrarian. We would say that, hey, you go back to the design board and look at, hey, every app needs to have a standard language, the domain language of growth intelligence. In this case, you introduce is what's the aha movement, what's the activation movement, what's all of these movements, and then you translate that to various apps. So maybe Michael, if you could circle back on now that when you reflect back on it, and now you started to mention that as growth intelligence, what would you say is growth intelligence now, right? When in AppFire, when you're doing this, you probably did not call it that way. You call it as analytics or something at that time, right? Now you're
Right.
starting to think about it, a lot more broadly, not just on the product side, but on the revenue side and things like that. So, could you maybe describe in your words on what do you now mean? What's a growth intelligence?
Well, first, growth intelligence is looking forward versus the rear view mirror looking at revenue and conversions. Growth intelligence is the term we used was actionable intelligence internally. It was information we could take action on literally in the moment, whether that was team members in the go-to-market team or whether that was automation. Something else. It was right there in front of us, so we could take action to influence those backward-looking, those rear mirror-looking metrics. And once we proved the impact we could have on growth and ultimately the impact we could have on revenue by understanding the journey and applying, devising growth experiments, and applying this playbook to these products, then we started expanding that. We started having cross-functional conversations with marketing, with support, with sales, and starting to show them we have real-time signals that are informing our tactics, but let's talk about how they could inform for example, your marketing email campaigns with these trial users. Let's talk about going beyond this canned email campaign that everyone gets the same message at the same cadence all the time. Let's take this real-time signals that we can hand you and let's shape how we communicate with the customers. And with the sales team, let's take these real-time signals and let it inform how you engage with our customers. Let it inform the conversations you have. Let that be part of your, again, your actionable intelligence that drives the tactics day to day, week to week that you're taking to make your contribution to growth.
Okay, so let me understand this, and maybe I might have a clarifying question on this. What you meant by growth intelligence now is being able to bring in and align your entire org. In this case, you're not focused only on the product side of the things, even though that's where you started seeing some of the problems. But you started aligning the product org, the GTM, the sales, maybe even the marketing org, who were driving the signups. You mentioned something which is a lot more contrarian. Started to align the customer success org, who were reaching out, to the teams on emails or whatever that might be. And you also align the revenue org, right? Being able to go bring in all of this. So essentially it's an alignment of 4 or 5 different orgs that you started taking that as part of the charter. I think the second thing that you mentioned is using real-time growth signals, to manifest the customer's journey, to be in the appropriate places of the customer journey. And that was very interesting. Most companies would think about signals as something that is within the product, like an app notification or something based on some event that has happened. But now you're talking about really clarifying the entire customer journey. When someone gets into a struggling state and the customer success team is now trying to go look into it, they get the same signals and they use the same signals almost in real time to do very standard set of things. I mean, is that what is that how you describe? And growth intelligence is A, alignment of teams, B, you know do real time signals, bring in on the real time signals, and 3, use the real time signals to affect the customer journey. Am I saying it right? Am I summarizing?
You are. It's very tempting to treat product as a silo, product management as a silo, and therefore the analytics that they use as to only be used in that silo. But the fact is, every member of the go-to-market team can leverage those signals, and especially if you have a product that perhaps is product led but benefits from a sales assisted play. It's got a particular amount of complexity, and I'm happy to go into detail on a specific example where we did that. Then get that data out, get that data in front of the people who are engaging with the customers to convert the trials. Now, again, it's going to vary by the model for every company, but absolutely don't silo that data.
Don't silo the data. I think that's probably your first first advice on that. Could you maybe share a little bit of details about how did you operationalize that data? Maybe share maybe anecdotes, if you will, share some examples. I think what you're mentioning here might be not very new to many people, but the details of this would be very, very interesting.
Sure. So let me share one that actually brings together that you kind of mentioned as an aside about, hey, most people think about using these signals inside the product, right? Mm-hmm. I have an example where it was both. So we had one of our most complex products that, because it's sold on the marketplace, by implication, it's a PLG motion, right? Mm-hmm. But it was so complex, it really needed a sales assist. But sales assist has to have a certain threshold, a certain ACV, right? Before you actually bring in humans, right? To be part of the sales motion. So what we did is we took the firmographic data that we had about our customers. So we had the company size, we had their industry, we had if we had sold them other products, we had the license tier for those other products, which was exactly the license tier, that this trial would get. We had all that data that let us solve for that segmentation of who are the customers that a sales assisted motion is worth it for, right? The ACV would be sufficient to be worth it. And we took behavioral data, which could tell us, again, in real time, could tell us which trial customers were having difficulty getting through the activation journey, getting to the value prop. And so we would, in the app, real time be monitoring for these behaviors or the segment. And those who fit that segment and were experiencing difficulty in onboarding, we'd pop up a call to action. We'd pop up a Pendo guide that invited them to engage with a solution advisor. And the solution advisor, was there to guide them through the product, answer the questions, basically a sales motion. Those who weren't in the segment still got the Pendo guys to help with onboarding, still got the email campaigns that were specific to their progress through the activation journey. But this allowed us to be very strategic about how we focused our sales assisted motion versus our PLG motion for our customers for that product.
Okay, got that. That makes sense. Maybe could you share another example? What intrigued me when you said that you brought in customer success. That's contrarian. Could you maybe share some examples where some of these real-time signals could be beneficial, either both theoretically as well as how AppFire might have used it, wherein these signals were used in a way to do their jobs, could be recover a customer or to, if they were, I'm not sure on the AppFire business, whether customer success teams were even incentivized to help them activated, meaning where the solution advisors really coming in from the customer success teams. So how did they use these signals? That's my core question.
Sure. Yeah. So to answer your last question first, solution advisors were pre-sales. Customer success was retention and expansion, essentially. Right. And yes, what we did for the customer success team is once the growth team had extended beyond activation and had moved to understanding engagement states, engagement signals that gave us indications of churn potential, then that gave us a great signal for customer success, where we could tell them exactly these customers for these products who renew in this time frame are struggling. Their engagement state is at a level that they are likely to churn. And this was another case where I talked about how we improved the correlation between activation and conversion. We do for ourselves with our own modeling. We did the same thing with engagement. We were able to demonstrate that different engagement states, levels of engagement of the team with the product, correlated with different retention rates. Mm-hmm. So we could very precisely tell customer success, you need to talk to these customers of this product about this specific difficulty they're having, or this particular benefit or feature they're missing out on the product, and have an informed conversation with them in order to retain them. Don't just, oftentimes customer success teams, they'll have their QBRs, right? And they may have some other conversational engagements. And I did this slide deck once talking about this very, very strategy internally. And on the slide deck, it was a scene from The Matrix, the blue pill versus the red pill. Mm-hmm. And it was basically offering, have conversations and maybe possibly find out what's really going on, or see real data. Mm-hmm. And see the real world and understand what's really happening so that you can have really informed conversations. And the analogy I gave them was If you're a trial lawyer and you go into court and you're deposing a witness, you never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. I'm giving you the answers to their questions already so that you can ask good questions and move the conversation to a helpful place to make sure they're getting value from our product and make sure they retain.
That's interesting. Could you maybe share, if it's possible, how did they take it? How did the customer success team, who may not have been used to given real-time signals like this and being told that, hey, there are maybe 10 customers that you should go work on right now, otherwise there's a risk. How did they take it?
Well, so I shared the strategy both with our customer success team and with our channel partners from an account management perspective. They didn't necessarily have customer success, but they were managing their existing accounts where they had resold our software to. And the reception varied. At one presentation, I had one of the members exclaim it was Christmas. I just given them this wonderful gift that was gonna help them make more money, basically. And others, the response was, well, that's interesting. And then it ended there.
Yeah.
So, there was definitely opportunity for improving the vision setting or, doing more education. But the more data informed teams had more success. Those who are hungry for those insights and wanted to learn how to, learn new and better ways to help make their customers succeed. Those are the ones who are receptive. Those who just liked having occasional phone calls and sending emails, maybe not so much.
Yeah, so I have a subsequent question to that one. So I think teams might react differently. I think you probably saw the two ends of the spectrum. It's interesting and do nothing about it, and then, hey, tell me more. And then so should we spend a little more time on, hey, tell me more. This is something I could use. Could you dive a little more deeper into how? And this is where I'm trying to understand, how did you use these signals and turn them into uh, revenue conversations? Because I think you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast that the leadership was very revenue focused at the very outset, right? So very likely that the same DNA might have percolated down to various teams. Could be sales teams, again, revenue focused. Product team may or may not be. Customer success teams, maybe, and so how did you take these conversations about these growth signals and turn them, associate that to, yeah, these are the real signals of the hundreds of signals we'll give you. These are the signals which will actually translate directly into revenue. So any thoughts, any indications that you heard from that?
Yeah. Well, let me talk about the percolation of motivation. Then I'll talk to you very specifically how we did that. It's an organizational reality that even if leadership gets it and leadership says, yes, this is the direction we need to go, it doesn't mean everybody on their team or in the subordinate teams are going to get the message and engage. So I would seek out, certainly early on, I would seek out those leaders or those individual contributors who got it. And I wanted basically work with them to become champions and for them to lead their peers and to show their peers by example a success that they could have with these tactics, because I can only show so many clever metaphors for how these signals are going to help them. But one thing, to get very specific, that I did to try to make it as concrete as possible is, again, going back to that firmographic license data we had besides the signal data, is we were shipping in our case we were shipping our analytics data into the Snowflake data warehouse, which is where all the other firmographic and building data lived as well. So that gave us the opportunity to build views, build dashboards that not only showed this is the customer who's having this trouble, here's how much money's at risk.
Interesting.
Right. And so I was able to put a number on it. And it went from, for some people, went from that's interesting to, okay, if I retain that customer, that's a third of my number for the quarter, for example, right?
Okay.
And with sales and oftentimes CS, customer success teams, having a number on their head, being coin operated, sometimes that was what we needed to do in order to form them. And frankly, they needed that to prioritize it, right? I could hand them 100 licenses that were at risk of churn. And that is the information they never had before. But when I put a revenue number on it, and that coupled with, okay, how long till they renew, right? A few other metrics, that informs prioritization. That informs then, focus this week, this month, I'm going to focus on these customers because maximum revenue at stake, right? And the decision times closer than others.
That's interesting. So I think we touched upon maybe I think, if I summarize what you just said is, you sought out those people who were getting it, you turned them into champions, and then, they became champions over a period of time because they could now know this is how the work that they would do directly, associate with revenue, right? And I think you gave 2 or 3 examples wherein, hey, here's the, revenue that's at risk, because
Right.
of renewal. Here's the revenue that's at risk because of a churn, right? And things like that. Could we flip that playbook? How did sales assist take it?
So it was very similar pattern. So a couple of different sales assist stories here. So the one I told earlier about the hand raisers to get help with the solution advisors, for them, there's another piece I don't think I shared there, which was we also gave them a dashboard where they could take essentially the license key for that particular license ID for the customer who would raise their hand. They could drop it into a dashboard, and it would give them a complete view. So all we, had a call to action, talk to this customer, they're having trouble. They have said, we detected they're having trouble. And then we gave them a dashboard that said, this is exactly how they're having trouble.
Interesting. Okay.
So this is what's going on. Again, same idea, well-informed questions. They're not asking a question they don't already know the answer to. Let's get to the heart of it and let's really help these customers out. So that was received very enthusiastically. Again, they're used to, before it was there's a pop-up form on the product site, on the product page, the marketing product page, talk to someone about this product, which is great. But one, most of the time they hadn't even started the trial yet. And you were starting, except for a couple things filled in on the form, you're more or less starting from square one with discovery to understand how you could help this customer. Whereas we were giving them, again, actionable intelligence, how they could take. So that was a revelation for them. And then the other side of the sales assistant is one other thing we did was, again, because AppFire is such a large app portfolio, very common for customers to have more than one product, or you're looking at other of our apps having already bought one. So we made a dashboard that showed the set of trials for existing customers. And the weird thing about Atlassian marketplace data is it's kind of hard to tell the value of a trial while the trial is ongoing. But if they're already a customer of ours, or if they had done a trial before, we knew almost certainly what tier they were going to be at because we had that data about the previous license. So I could then give them, hey, these are the customers who are in the middle of trials that we've encountered before. So now I can tell you what the potential revenue is for this particular trial. So once again, I could help the sales team prioritize which trial customers to go talk to based upon the potential revenue from that license.
Got it. So I think maybe to summarize this, pretty much for each of the organizational teams, you had similar dashboards. You mentioned about customer success, getting a dashboard or some kind of a data to them, and a very similar exercise for sales assist as well. Primarily focusing on the trials. Right. I'm guessing that might be the same rhythm that you might have followed, the same pattern that you could have followed at all the other five teams that were contributing towards growth. With that said, I want to segue into organizational enablement. I want to spend a little more time on how did you essentially stitch all of them together? All of these are different teams. And you keep telling me a little more about that. Hey, data essentially stitches everything together. But in your case, how did you bring all of them together on the same page? Was dashboards the only view? And what was your role in enabling? When I say your role, your team's role in enabling that these dashboards, which are which go after different leaders within the organization, they are trued up to the business value that that they were looking for.
Yeah. So one, yes, dashboards, but only dashboards because at the time that was the fastest way to get the data in front of those team members. The ultimate goal was to just send the discrete signals into the CRM and put this, or in case of sales, put it into the CRM so that the data was right there where they worked. It was part of their workflow. I really didn't want sales team members having to swivel between screens, right, and understand it. But I wasn't going to make the perfect enemy of the good. The first order of business was educating them on what was available, getting the data in front of them, because in any organization that's had built out their tool set or infrastructure a bit, there's going to take some time. Oftentimes you have to get in line, right? If you want to do an integration or if you want to update your CRM's data structure, right? So I took that approach of getting data there. And how we were able to accomplish that is because early on, we invested, as I mentioned earlier, in shipping a lot of data into Snowflake. So we had various platforms that were collecting these signals. We got them all into Snowflake because we wanted to hold them together with the firmographic data and other data that we had. And so what that then allowed us to do, for example, for marketing, is the behavioral data, the firmographic data, the account data could all inform audience definition. So we could have a customer data platform that defined an audience based on all of those signals, all of that data, and signals from marketing that I haven't even discussed yet, right? Bring all those signals together to define an audience, and that's how we did those. When I talked about the email campaigns that were specific to each individual trial's experience, how far along they were on the trial, they got specific targeted messaging, not just direct messaging. Well, we could do that as we were shipping all these behavioral signals into a place where we could put a CDP in front of it and find those audiences.
So it's pretty revealing on this part. Michael, if I had met you almost 2 years back, you would have been a best test case for us. But alas, we didn't meet at that time.
Well, that's why I'm such a fan of ThriveStack, because, like I told you the first time you showed it to me, hell, I've been trying to wire this up myself.
Sure, and that's exactly why we think we're gonna grow much faster there. So Michael, maybe let me boil this down to you went through this journey at at one company, AppFire, and now you're advising various of the customers, on how to do, how to enable growth intelligence and how, and benefit the larger organization rather than just the product or the marketing, or a very siloed approach out there. What would be maybe some one or two practical advices to either practitioners or SaaS founders that you would tell them that, hey, these are the two things, think about these as maybe the core playbook that you should have in your arsenals. This is what you should be doing at the stage that you are in.
Well, one thing I'll go back to kind of like the fundamentals in the early part of our conversation. It is tempting to, when we're talking about instrumentation, it's very tempting to instrument everything. In fact, there are tools out there that say, drop this JavaScript, and 10 minutes later, you've got analytics. You do, but there are very noisy analytics for products, for apps. And, we weren't instrumenting, a marketing page, right? We were instrumenting apps that people are doing real work in. So just like I described, be very deliberate about what you're instrumenting. Have a question that you want to answer, and then decide what is the minimum amount of data you've got to collect to answer that question. I would start with the my first question would be, are our customers actually experiencing, or our trial users in the case of PLG, are they actually experiencing the value prop?
Mm-hmm.
That's one or very small number of events, but right there, that is the key to conversion. Are they seeing the value of the product? Answer that question first. Then you can work your way back. When you're mapping out the activation journey I talked about, the setup moment, the sign up moment, and so forth, map that out to understand why they aren't seeing the value prop. But don't. It's very tempting, and you see it all over the place where people are in such a hurry that they just instrument everything without a real deliberate plan. And then a year later, they're talking about how sloppy their data is and how they need to clean it up. And I would say, start simple.
And how they're paying $40,000 or $60,000 to Amplitude or something like that.
I've seen those bills. Oh yeah. I mean, I had the biggest fire hose, at AppFire in terms of data, and I was being careful about what I was collecting. So yeah, those bills can go up there, but they don't. At least I knew what I was collecting was very deliberate, right, and was useful, not just a bunch of noise.
Yeah. So I think your first advice was be very specific, define a goal, keep it small, and then only instrument, towards that, and not necessarily go, on a free will to go implement all the other telemetry. Anything else that you would recommend?
Yeah, when you are, the output of that instrumentation is, I want to answer a question, right? When you start building out your analytics and you are, ask for this dashboard, that SQL query, that report, it's very easy to become very scattered. Again, very scattered in that sense. You should have very clear questions, very clear strategy in mind that informs the signals that you're presenting to your stakeholders. And those signals should have a clear call to action. So for example, going back to that sales team story I told, ultimately, I want to get to not, hey, sales team, look at this dashboard, here's what it can tell you, but rather, hey, sales team, go talk to this customer about this thing because of this reason. It's worth this much. I want very clear call to action. Same for customer success. For marketing, I want to say, hey, marketing, engage with this customer about this thing because they're behaving this way. And it's risking this much revenue, or there's this much revenue to be won. You don't want to be slinging dashboards. I mean, they're pretty and you need some, absolutely. But really, what you're trying to do is give every stakeholder a very clear call to action. Answer the question so they can act on it, not give them a whole bunch of numbers they have to look at and do the interpretation themselves.
Yeah, I think those are two wonderful advices. If I can summarize, start small. Don't try to boil the ocean. I think that's what you meant by,
Mm-hmm.
and then the second one was be very specific, to your stakeholders. Which is, don't again give them a whole bunch of load of data. Ask them, hey, here's 10 things that you should do, or 2 things to do, so that you can recover your customer or activate them faster.
Right.
Michael, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I think probably you and I, we can go on and on about this, but unfortunately, we want to keep the podcast a lot more smaller. So again, appreciate the time. I'm going to go stop the stop button now. Thank you so much
Okay.
again.